My name is Emma Hale. I am 34 years old. And 12 years after my family called me a failure for leaving college, my older brother applied to become vice president of sales at the company I founded. He did not know it was mine. My legal surname was Hale, the maiden name my mother stopped using when she married my father. The company was called Hale Systems. Daniel believed it belonged to a private equity group in Chicago because that was what trade magazines said after our latest funding round. He had no idea the woman sitting behind the mirrored interview glass, listening to him explain leadership, resilience, and earned success, was the same sister he once watched carry 2 trash bags out of our parents' house. He had no idea our parents had called my first failed business proof that I lacked discipline. He did not know they had helped him with tuition, Ozeron, Akar, introductions, and 3 career rescues, while telling relatives that anything I accomplished came from stubbornness rather than talent. And he definitely did not know that the final interview included an integrity exercise built from his own application. At 1014 that morning, Daniel told the hiring panel he had built every stage of his career without family assistance. At 10:17, our head of people slid a sealed evidence packet across the table. Inside were tuition transfers, mortgage payments, recommendation letters, and consulting fees from our father's company, totaling $683,400. Daniel looked at the first page and said there had been a mistake. Then the conference room door opened, and I walked in. His face went completely still. "Emma," he whispered. I placed my founder badge on the table and said, "Before we discuss the job, we need to discuss the story you told about how you got here." By the end of the day, Daniel would not have the executive position, but he would have a second interview for a lower role. One condition attached before our parents. He had to acknowledge that the success they used to measure me against had been subsidized from the beginning. Welcome back to Hidden Family Reckoning, where the person everyone dismisses eventually owns the building where they ask for work. If your family has ever called you a failure while quietly financing someone else's success, this story is for you. Tell me in the comments whether you would have rejected Daniel immediately or given him one honest chance. And subscribe, because by the end, my parents would sit in my boardroom, hear the exact dollar amount they spent building the self-made son, and learn that I had created a company worth $186 million without ever asking them to believe in it. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a family that treated comparison as motivation. My father, Richard Cole, owned a regional commercial printing business. My mother, Margaret, managed the home, the church calendar, and the emotional weather of every room. Daniel was 3 years older and understood early how to make adults feel confirmed. He got good grades, played varsity tennis, and chose a business degree because my father said practical men studied practical things. I was curious in a less orderly way. I took apart radios, wrote small programs, sold handmade planners online, and changed interests whenever I found a harder problem. My parents called Daniel focused. They called me scattered. When Daniel needed help, it was investment. When I needed help, it was evidence. The family story became fixed before either of us was old enough to challenge it. Daniel was the reliable one. Emma was creative but unrealistic. Daniel would inherit responsibility. Emma would need supervision. My mother often told relatives, "Emma is brilliant in her own way," which sounded generous until you realized the phrase excluded me from the ordinary meaning of brilliant. My father's version was simpler. "She starts things," he said. "Daniel finishes them." At 18, I enrolled at Ohio State University to study information systems. Daniel was already attending a private business college in Boston. My parents paid his tuition, apartment, meals, books, travel, and summer housing. They bought him a used BMW because he said networking required the right image. I received partial tuition support and worked 25 hours a week at a campus cafe. My father said the difference reflected commitment. Daniel had a clear path. I had too many ideas. During my second year, I built a scheduling tool for the cafe where I worked. The manager spent hours matching employee availability to shifts. My software reduced scheduling time from 6 hours to 40 minutes and cut missed shifts by nearly a third. Other cafes asked to use it. I saw a company. My professors saw a promising project. My parents saw distraction. I left school at 21 to build the software full-time with a classmate named Priya Shah. We called the company ShiftMap. We raised $30,000 from local business owners and moved into a small office above a laundromat. For 9 months, we worked constantly. We signed 12 customers and Wordy Everseas, Eddie N. Wordy. Then a larger payroll platform released a similar feature for free. 3 customers canceled in 1 week. Our investor withdrew the next installment. Priya returned to school. I kept going for 4 more months until the account balance reached $211. I went home because I had nowhere else to go. My parents allowed me to sleep in the old guest room for 6 weeks. Every dinner became a post-mortem. My father said I had confused enthusiasm with ability. My mother said leaving college had embarrassed the family. Daniel was home for a holiday and said, "At some point you have to accept that not everyone is built to lead." He did not say it cruelly. That made it worse. He said it as though he were explaining weather. At the end of 6 weeks, my father placed 2 documents on the kitchen table. One was an application to re-enroll in college. The other was a typed household agreement requiring me to stop all business activity, work at his printing company, pay rent, and give him access to my bank statements. "You need structure," he said. "I need time." "You had time. I built something. You lost money. So did your company in 2008. His face hardened. "Do not compare yourself to me." My mother said, "Emma, this family is trying to save you." I looked at the agreement. It did not save me. It converted failure into permanent custody. "I'm not signing it," I said. My father stood. "Then you cannot live here." Daniel looked down at his plate. My mother cried. 2 hours later, I packed clothes, a laptop, and 3 notebooks into 2 trash bags. My father watched from the hallway. "You will come back when reality catches up," he said. Reality did catch up. It just did not take me back there. I spent the first night on the couch of a former cafe coworker named Lena Brooks. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates and a furnace that clicked every 7 minutes. I had $186. A laptop with a broken hinge, and no degree. The next morning, I applied to 23 jobs. 2 responded. One was a commission-only phone sales position. The other was a server opening at a hotel restaurant. I took the restaurant job because it included meals. For 18 months, I carried plates, learned wine descriptions, and smiled at people who looked through me. I worked breakfast shifts from 6 to 2, then cleaned data for small businesses at night. Failure became ordinary enough to stop feeling like identity. It was rent due on Friday. It was a code error at 100 AM. It was choosing whether to buy detergent or replace a charger. There was relief in that. My family had turned failure into a verdict. Life turned it back into a condition. Conditions can change. Priya and I remained friends. She finished school and joined a logistics company. One evening, she called because her employer was losing bids. Sales representatives maintained customer information in separate spreadsheets. So pricing commitments, renewal dates, and procurement rules disappeared whenever someone left. Existing customer software was too generic for the company's complex contracts. I built a small internal tool that mapped relationships among customers, contract obligation, sales actions, and delivery performance. Priya's director paid me $12,000. The tool helped recover 2 delayed renewals worth nearly $1 million. A second distributor asked for a version, then a construction supplier. The problem was not scheduling anymore. It was institutional memory. Companies did not know what they knew. People carried critical relationships privately. And leadership discovered the dependency only after someone resigned. I called the new product Threadline. The name later changed. But the idea remained: make hidden business relationships visible before they become risk. I registered the company using my legal surname. Hale. Hale was my mother's maiden name and the surname on my birth certificate because my parents had not married until I was 2. At school and in the family, everyone called me Emma Cole. Professionally, I became Emma Hale because the first bank account required the legal name. The distance helped. Hale Systems did not sound like the daughter my father had removed from his house. It sounded like infrastructure. I rented a desk at a co-working space. Lena became our first customer support hire. Priya joined nights and weekends. We sold to businesses ignored by larger software vendors, regional manufacturers, distributors, hospital suppliers, and service companies with complicated accounts but limited technical staff. I wrote code. Priya handled implementation. Lena answered every customer question with the patience she once used on hotel guests. Our first year produced $178,000 in revenue. The second produced $640,000. The third crossed $2 million. I paid myself $48,000 until our 10th employee joined. There were no magazine profiles. There were no parents writing checks. There were customers who renewed because the software worked. At 26, I completed my degree through an online program. 2 courses at a time. I did not tell my family. I attended virtual graduation from the office with Priya and Lena eating grocery store cake behind me. The diploma arrived in a cardboard envelope. I placed it in a drawer. I had wanted education. I had rejected custody. Not learning. My family knew pieces of my life, but never assembled them because they had already decided what the whole picture meant. My mother sent birthday messages that began warmly and ended with links to stable job openings. My father called twice a year. He asked whether I was still doing computer work. I said yes. He asked whether it provided benefits. I said the company provided them. He assumed I was an employee. Daniel connected with me on a professional site but never read beyond my job title, founder. Hale Systems. He believed founder meant freelancer because our family treated entrepreneurship as legitimate only after institutions approved it. At holidays, I attended rarely. When I did, my father described Daniel's promotions in detail. Daniel moved from corporate banking to enterprise software sales. My parents financed the transitions invisibly. They paid his graduate tuition after he said an MBA would accelerate leadership. They covered rent during a 6-month job search. My father gave him a vice president title at the printing company so he could claim executive experience. A family friend introduced him to a software firm. When that company reduced staff, my parents paid his mortgage for 11 months. None of this made Daniel incompetent. He was persuasive, organized, and good in rooms. The problem was the story. Every cushion became evidence that he landed well. Every absence of a cushion in my life became evidence that I should not have jumped. At my grandmother's 70th birthday, my father announced that Daniel had become regional sales director at Norwell Data. An uncle asked what I was doing. Before I answered, my mother said, "Emma has a little software business. She is still finding her way." Hale Systems employed 43 people and had just signed a $14 million 5-year contract. I could have corrected her. I did not. Silence had become part protection and part experiment. I wanted to see how long a family could remain certain when information sat within reach. The answer was years. They never visited my office. They never opened the articles I sent. My mother once forwarded a feature about hail systems to me with the message, Axter is Aster, Axter 2, Offern is Axter. This is the kind of company you should apply to. My photograph was not included because the article focused on our product. I replied, interesting company. She sent a thumbs up. Our growth accelerated after we launched a risk intelligence platform for industrial sales teams. Hail systems could identify accounts at risk of cancellation, map decision makers, track promises buried in email, and flag when reported pipeline lacked operational support. We did not spy on employees. We organized authorized company information and made assumptions testable. That distinction became central to our culture. Sales software often rewarded confidence. We required evidence. By our 10th year, annual recurring revenue reached $42 million. A Chicago investment firm purchased a minority stake, valuing the company at $186 million. Business publications began referring to Hale as private equity-backed, which made Daniel assume outside financiers had founded it. I remained controlling shareholder with 41% after employee equity. Priya owned 9. Lena held 2. And the rest belonged to employees and investors. I had wealth. But ownership mattered more. I had built a system where work could receive credit without requiring family belief. Daniel's application arrived because Norwell data collapsed into an accounting scandal. The company had counted unsigned renewals as contracted revenue and pushed distributors to accept inventory they had not requested. Daniel was not charged with wrongdoing, but he led a sales region whose forecasts became part of the investigation. His resume said he exceeded quota for 7 consecutive years. It did not say 3 of those years depended on channel incentives. The company later reversed. Hale Systems needed a vice president of sales after our previous leader announced retirement. The role managed 120 employees, a $70 million pipeline, and relationships with customers who depended on accurate implementation promises. The search firm delivered a confidential shortlist. Candidates did not receive founder information until the final stage because I wanted the committee to evaluate them without performing for me. Daniel applied through the firm. He had never purchased Hale software. He knew our market reputation and valuation. The role paid $320,000 base, plus incentive and equity. It was large enough to restore the identity he felt Norwell had taken. Our head of people, Carmen Ruiz, noticed the surname difference but recognized the family connection from an old emergency contact form. Is Daniel Cole related to you? She asked. He is my brother. Do you want him removed? No. Do you want to interview him? Not initially. That is still a conflict. Then disclose the relationship to the independent hiring committee and let them decide whether he advances. The committee included Carmen, Priya, a board member named Douglas Reed, and our chief customer officer. They reviewed Daniel like any other candidate. His experience was strong. His references described him as charismatic and demanding. One former colleague praised his ability to secure resources. Another said he accepted credit too quickly and responsibility too slowly. The committee advanced him because executive hiring should not become family revenge disguised as process. I recused myself from scoring the first 3 rounds. I watched recordings later. Daniel performed well. He understood enterprise procurement, could build partner networks, and knew how to structure compensation. But our evaluation also measured truth under pressure. We gave candidates a fictional sales portfolio containing inflated probabilities, inherited accounts, and undisclosed support costs. Daniel increased the forecast instead of correcting it. He argued that executive confidence could create internal momentum. Carmen asked what happened if delivery teams could not meet commitments. He said operations needed to adapt. Priya wrote one sentence in her notes: same family system. Corporate vocabulary. Still. Daniel advanced to the final round because competence can coexist with a dangerous habit. And the purpose of a final round is to decide whether the habit can be corrected. The last exercise required candidates to submit a narrative of one major success: identifying resources, sponsorship, inherited advantages, and personal contribution. Daniel chose his rise at Norwell. He wrote that he had entered without connections, built the territory from nothing, and financed his MBA personally. Every statement was material because the role required certification of sales data. Carmen asked permission to verify. Daniel signed. The verification company found tuition payments from Richard and Margaret Cole, consulting payments from Cole Commercial Print during gaps in employment, and a recommendation letter from a family friend on Norwell's board. The search did not examine his private finances beyond authorized records. Daniel had listed the MBA and employment chronology. Verification revealed the support. End of rates. Daniel had listed the MBA. Carmen called me. "This is no longer just your family history," she said. "He made a false statement in an executive assessment. Then handle it as you would any candidate. We would confront him and allow correction before final decision. Do that. Do you want to be present?" Behind the glass. The evidence packet was not created to humiliate Daniel. It was a compliance tool. Page 1 compared his written narrative with verified facts. Page 2 listed $88,000 in graduate tuition paid by our parents. Page 3 showed 36 months of rent and mortgage assistance totaling $154,000. Page 4 showed compensation from our father's printing company during periods when Daniel claimed to be independently consulting, $211,000. Page 5 listed the BMW, relocation costs, legal fees, and a $100,000 down payment on his first home. Page 6 documented introductions and recommendation letters, but assigned them no monetary value. The cash total was $683,400. The number did not prove Daniel lacked skill. It proved his claim of no family assistance was false. At 10:00 on the final interview day, Daniel entered conference room 3, wearing a navy suit and carrying a leather portfolio. I watched from the adjoining room with independent counsel. Carmen began with ordinary questions. Why Hale? Why now? How would he restore trust after Norwell? Daniel said Hale represented disciplined growth and accountability. He praised our evidence-based forecasting culture. Then Douglas asked about the success narrative. You wrote that you financed your MBA personally. He said, correct. Did anyone reimburse tuition? No. Carmen slid the sealed packet toward him. Our verification found direct payments from Richard and Margaret Cole. Daniel opened the packet. His eyes moved faster than his face. Those were family gifts. Then why did you say no assistance? I understood the question to mean professional assistance. You also wrote that you entered Norwell without connections. I did. Douglas showed the recommendation letter from board member Stephen Walsh, a longtime client of our father. Daniel said a recommendation did not guarantee the position. True. Carmen asked why he omitted it when the exercise specifically requested sponsorship and inherited advantage. Daniel said the process felt invasive. You authorized verification. She replied, I did not authorize an audit of my family. We verified claims you selected for an executive integrity exercise. His posture changed. He was no longer speaking to a hiring committee. He was fighting the feeling of being reclassified. This is absurd, he said. Everyone gets help. The result is what matters. Priya asked. Then why not say you received help? Because I earned my career. Those are not mutually exclusive. Daniel looked toward the mirrored glass. Perhaps he sensed an audience. Who requested this? He asked. Carmen answered. The standard process. I want to speak to the founder. I opened the door. Daniel turned. Recognition appeared in stages. My face. My badge. the company name. The surname he had never considered. Emma, he said. Hello. Danielle. What are you doing here? I placed my badge on the table. Emma Hale. Founder and executive chair. I work here. You founded this. Yes. He looked at Priya. Then Carmen. Then the packet. This is a setup. You applied through an independent search. You let me come through 5 interviews. The committee advanced you. I recused myself, and now you are using our parents' money against me. No. The company is evaluating a false statement you made about resources behind your career. You have been waiting 12 years for this. I learned about your application 6 weeks ago. You could have called me. For what to tell me? You did not research the company you wanted to lead. The room went silent. Daniel had prepared for strategy, compensation, and authority. He had not prepared to discover that his rejected sister owned the opportunity. Daniel asked the panel to leave. Carmen refused. This is an employment process, not a sibling conversation. That sentence protected both of us. Family systems survive by converting formal accountability into private emotion. If everyone left, Daniel could accuse me of revenge, apologize ambiguously, or ask what I wanted as his sister. With the panel present, the question remained what it had always been. Could he lead a company built on accurate attribution? I sat across from him. The executive role is no longer available to you, I said. His jaw tightened. You made that decision already. The committee made the recommendation after you repeated the false claim. Carmen confirmed the vote was unanimous. Then why am I still here? Daniel asked. Because your operational experience is real, Priya said. And because one of our regional director roles remains open, it is 2 levels below the position you applied for. The committee is willing to consider you if you correct the record and complete a second assessment. He looked at me. You expect me to work for you? Everyone here works for the company. Do Mom and Dad know? No. You hid this from them for 12 years. I did not hide. They did not ask. He laughed once without humor. That is convenient. Mom forwarded me an article about Hale and suggested I apply. Dad asked whether my little business offered health insurance. You viewed my profile. None of you read past the story you preferred. So, this is punishment. Punishment would be rejecting you because you watched me leave home. Process is rejecting you because you made a false statement in an integrity assessment. Daniel pushed the packet away. What does correcting the record mean? Carmen answered. A written amendment to your application. Disclosure to the panel. A conversation with any future team about the Norwell forecast issues. And because your success narrative specifically used family comparison, Emma has requested one additional condition outside employment before she consents to further family contact. You acknowledge the support accurately to Richard and Margaret. That has nothing to do with the job. Correct. I said. It is not a condition of employment. It is a condition of having a relationship with me. The company's condition is the amended application. Mine separate. That distinction frustrated him because it removed the argument that I was abusing corporate authority. He could decline the lower role and still tell the truth. He could pursue the role and refuse family contact. The choices remained his. You want me to humiliate myself? He said. No. I want you to stop using their help as proof that you deserved more belief than I did. They helped you too. Listed. He opened his mouth, then stopped. My parents paid part of my first year of tuition. They allowed 6 weeks in the guest room. They gave me no startup money. No car. No rent. No introduction. And no rescue after shift map failed. The comparison did not require moral drama. It required a ledger. The $683,000 is not a debt. I said. It is context. You can be talented and supported. You can be successful and advantaged. What you cannot do here is erase the support and call the result evidence of superior character. Daniel looked at the founder badge again. How much of this company do you own? Enough that the question is irrelevant to your application. What is it worth? The latest valuation was $186 million. His face changed. Not envy exactly. Recalculation. For 12 years. Every family conversation had placed us on a line with him ahead. The number did not reverse the line. It revealed that the line had been imaginary. Daniel left without accepting the second interview. For 3 days. He sent nothing. My mother called on the fourth, pressed. Her voice carried the controlled urgency she used when information had arrived without her permission. Daniel says you own Hail Systems. I founded it. Why didn't you tell us I did? You said you had a software company. That was the information. Not like this. What does like this mean? A real company. There it was. Success became real only when valuation, buildings, and job applications made dismissal impossible. My father joined the call. Did you deliberately conceal your identity from Daniel? My legal name is Emma Hale. It appears on the company filings and website. He says the website lists an executive team but not a founder biography. We removed founder-centered marketing years ago. You knew he was applying. After the search firm delivered the shortlist, and you let him embarrass himself. He made a false statement. My mother said. He was simplifying. He said you provided no financial or professional assistance. Silence. That is not literally true. My father admitted. Then why are we arguing? Because family support should not be used against him. It was used in his favor for 12 years. My mother began crying. We did our best for both children. I felt the old pull to soften accuracy until it resembled forgiveness. You paid for Daniel's opportunities and called the results discipline. You withheld support from me and called the struggle character. I am not asking you to apologize for helping him. I am asking you to stop using the different outcomes as proof that you judged us correctly. My father said. You still left college. I completed the degree later. He was silent again. When my mother asked, 8 years ago, why didn't you invite us? You had already decided the education only counted if I returned under Dad's rules. My mother said that was unfair. I replied, then tell me what you knew about my life before Daniel applied. Neither answered. I ended the call with one invitation, a meeting at Hail Systems the following Friday. Facilitated by Carmen and an outside family therapist named Dr. Point One, Evelyn Morris. Attendance was voluntary. The purpose was not reconciliation. It was correction of the record. Daniel could present his own account. My parents could review the support ledger. I would explain nothing about my personal wealth beyond what was publicly documented. No one would request jobs, investments, gifts, or board seats. My father objected to rules. I said rules were why the meeting could happen. They all agreed. Family members who resist boundaries often attend when they believe the boundary hides an asset. The meeting took place in our boardroom, but I deliberately sat at the side rather than the head. Carmen opened with confidentiality and scope. Dr. Morris stated that no employment decision would be negotiated. Daniel had already been denied the vice president role. A regional sales director interview remained available for 7 days if he submitted a corrected application. My mother looked surprised. Daniel had told them I refused him entirely. Carmen recorded the correction. This is why precise language matters. She said. Daniel looked down. On the screen, our compliance analyst displayed the support ledger. Graduate tuition $88,000. Housing support across 14 years, $154,000. Employment and consulting payments from Cole Commercial Print, $211,000. Vehicle, insurance, relocation, and legal costs, $70,400. Home down payment $100,000. Additional direct cash during job transitions, $60,000. Total, $683,400. My mother said some payments were gifts and therefore should not count. The analyst replied, "The ledger measures resources, not debt." My father said Daniel had worked at the printing company. Payroll records showed periods of work and periods of no assigned duties. I was advising. Daniel said, on what Carmen asked. He could not identify projects for 2 of the periods. My father became angry. "What is the point of this, doctor?" Morris answered. "To separate assistance from moral ranking." She asked my parents to describe the support they gave me after shift map failed. 6 weeks of housing. Food. An offer of employment conditioned on financial monitoring and ending the business. No cash. No introduction. No return to school unless I accepted the household agreement. My mother said they believed strictness would help me. Did strictness produce hail systems, Dr. Frauve? Morris asked. My father said, adversity may have motivated me. That was the final way powerful people claim ownership of outcomes they opposed. No. I said. The people who helped build Hale are in this building. Priya brought the first customer problem. Lena gave me a couch and became our first support employee. Customers paid us. Staff took lower salaries for equity. Investors bought minority stakes. You do not get to convert eviction into mentorship because I survived it. My mother covered her mouth. My father looked toward the city through the glass wall. Daniel remained still. Then he said, "They helped me because I asked." I looked at him. Sometimes. They also anticipated your needs because they believed your future deserved protection. And they did not protect yours. Correct. He turned toward our parents. You paid my rent when Norwell moved me to Atlanta. My mother nodded. You paid the mortgage after the layoffs. Another nod. Dad gave me an executive title when I needed one for the next job. My father said, you did work. Not enough for the title. Daniel, no. He took a breath. Emma is right about the story. I worked hard. I am also not self-made. I had a floor under every fall. She did not. The room became quiet. My mother whispered. We loved you both. Daniel answered. Then we need to stop using what you gave me as evidence that I was more deserving. It was the sentence I had waited 12 years to hear. And when it arrived, it did not feel triumphant. It felt like a door unlocking in a house I no longer lived in. My parents responded differently. My mother apologized immediately and broadly. She was sorry for everything. Sorry, I felt alone. Sorry, the family misunderstood. Doctor. Morris asked her to name specific actions. Margaret struggled. Specificity removes the comfort of grief without responsibility. Eventually she said, I called shift map a phase without learning what it did. I supported the agreement that would have required access to your bank account. I let you leave with trash bags. I described Hale as little because accepting its size meant accepting that our judgment was wrong. I praised Daniel's independence while writing checks. My father took longer. He said he had tried to teach accountability. I asked whether accountability required equal information. He said yes. Did he disclose the financial support behind Daniel's career when comparing us? Did he review my product? Customers? Or financial reports before calling me unrealistic? No. Did he ever ask what I needed after the first company failed? I offered you a job. You offered supervision. He stared at the ledger. I thought if I gave you more money, you would lose more. And Daniel, I trusted his plan. Because of the plan or because he was Daniel? He did not answer. Doctor, Morris allowed the silence to remain. The meeting ended after 2 hours. No hugs. No photographs. No tour of the executive floor. My mother asked whether she could see my office. I said not that day. Access to a building is not the same as access to a life. Daniel submitted a corrected application that evening. His amendment stated that his career had benefited from substantial financial support. Family-sponsored employment, introductions, and protection during transitions. He also revised the Norwell success narrative. He acknowledged that channel incentives had inflated forecasts and that he had defended targets longer than evidence justified. The hiring panel offered him the regional director interview. I remained recused. He completed a forecasting exercise again. This time, he reduced the pipeline by 23%, identified unsupported assumptions, and created a recovery plan. Rather than demanding operations adapt, he interviewed former subordinates as references and authorized them to speak confidentially. 2. Described pressure and poor credit sharing. Daniel addressed both directly. The committee offered him the regional sales director position on a 1-year performance agreement. The salary was $185,000. Less than his previous compensation, and far less than the executive role. He would report to our chief revenue officer. Not to me. No special equity. No guaranteed promotion. A 6-month leadership coach. Daniel accepted. Before signing, he asked whether I wanted him there. My personal feelings are not the hiring standard. I said, that is not what I asked. I considered the honest answer. I want to see whether you can work inside a system where attribution matters more than performance theater. And as your brother, I do not know yet. He nodded. That is fair. Daniel's first months at Hale were harder than rejection would have been. Rejection would have allowed him to keep a simple story. His sister was bitter. Employment required daily evidence. He entered a company where many employees knew I had founded it, but few knew he was my brother. Carmen disclosed the relationship only to those managing conflicts. Daniel received the same onboarding as every director. His office was on the 6th floor, 2 below mine. He had no access to founder meetings. Captable information, or board materials. The first test came when a major prospect requested a feature our product team could not deliver for 9 months. Daniel's old instinct was to promise a pilot in 90 days and let operations find a solution. He drafted the proposal, then stopped. He called the product lead, revised the timeline, and told the prospect exactly what existed. We lost the immediate contract. 6 weeks later, the prospect returned after another vendor missed its promise. The account signed for 3 years. Daniel sent the internal announcement naming every product and implementation employee involved. No one told him to. At his 6-month review, the chief revenue officer rated him strong in strategy, improving in accountability, and inconsistent in listening when challenged. Daniel did not argue. He asked for examples. That was new. At family dinners, which I attended only every few months. My parents struggled not to turn his employment into another comparison. My mother once said, "It is wonderful that both our children are finally successful together." I corrected her. We were successful separately. Daniel now works at Hale. She apologized. My father asked whether I planned to promote him. The revenue organization decides based on performance and need, but you control the company. Control is why I have to respect the process. He did not like the answer. But he stopped asking after Daniel said, "Dad, please, do not lobby for me." The sentence cost Daniel more than the public acknowledgement. He was refusing the advantage while it was being offered. My parents entered therapy with Dr. Morris for 6 months. I joined every 3rd session. We did not reconstruct a close family. We constructed accurate contact. My mother learned not to send job listings or advice disguised as concern. My father visited Hale only after an invitation and spent more time speaking with Priya and Lena than examining my office. At the end of the tour, he said, "I thought companies became real when investors arrived." Priya replied, "It was real when 3 people stayed up fixing customer data at 2 a.m. He nodded. I appreciated that she said it. Because founders are often asked to translate collective labor into personal vindication, Hale was not a monument proving my father wrong. It was thousands of decisions made by people who did not know him. The support ledger changed my relationship with money too. For years, I had been proud that I accepted nothing. Pride can protect dignity and still become another prison. I paid employees competitively, created emergency grants, and funded professional development because I knew what absence of support cost, but I found it difficult to accept help personally. I drove myself home after medical procedures. I avoided asking friends to move furniture. I treated dependence as the first stage of control. Therapy helped me separate assistance from ownership. Lena's couch had been help. Priya's first introduction had been help. Customers who paid deposits early had helped. Employees who trusted equity had helped. The honest story of Hale was not self-made either. It was support without erasure. That became the difference I wanted Daniel and my parents to understand. Receiving help does not reduce achievement. Hiding help while using it to rank people corrupts achievement. Daniel completed his one-year agreement without major violation. He did not become vice president. The company hired an external executive with experience scaling international teams. Daniel was disappointed but congratulated her publicly and stayed. 2 years later, he became senior regional director after improving retention and developing 3 managers who were promoted ahead of him. His compensation rose. His title became less important because his work became more visible in the correct direction, credit flowing outward, responsibility flowing inward. Our sibling relationship remained cautious. We met for breakfast once a month, usually without discussing the company. He apologized for the night I left home. I looked down because I knew the agreement was wrong. He said, "I also knew speaking might risk what they gave me. Did you think I would come back?" "Yes. We all did." "Why?" "Because we thought having nowhere to go meant you would accept our version of you." I appreciated the accuracy. I did not tell him everything was forgiven. We were not returning to childhood. We were learning adulthood without the ranking. My father sold Cole Commercial Print after a difficult year. The sale price was lower than he expected. Daniel and I did not invest. My parents moved to a smaller house. They were financially stable. But the identity of family success shifted. My father once admitted that he had expected Daniel to protect the family legacy and me to need protection from it. "I was wrong about both of you," he said. Daniel replied, "You were wrong about what protection means. No one asked me to buy the company, preserve the old office, or place à Cole, name on Hale. That absence was progress. 12 years after I left my parents' house with 2 trash bags, Hale Systems opened a new customer learning center in Columbus. We chose the city because many of our manufacturing clients were nearby. Not because of my family. The building included classrooms for small businesses transitioning from spreadsheets to modern systems. At the opening, Lena displayed our first customer support notebook. Priya showed the original threadline diagram. I placed the broken hinge laptop in a glass case with a card that read Failure 1. Version 2. My parents attended as guests. Daniel attended as an employee and stood with his team rather than beside me for photographs. A reporter asked my father how it felt to see his daughter return home as a successful founder. I watched him consider the flattering answer. Then he said, "She did not return. She built somewhere else. And we were invited to visit." It was the best answer he had ever given. My mother later asked whether the company name honored her. It began as my legal surname. I said, "But Grandma's family name gave me a place to work without the Cole story attached." She looked sad. "I wish I had understood. I wish you had asked." She nodded. We did not make sadness responsible for closing the distance. Some distance remained. That was healthy. The title of this story says my family called me a failure, and 12 years later my brother applied to work for me. The satisfying version ends with me rejecting him, revealing the valuation, and watching everyone regret their judgment. But revenge would have repeated the family's central mistake, using one professional outcome as proof of a person's total worth. Daniel was not superior when he had a better title. He was not worthless when Norwell collapsed. I was not a failure when ShiftMap closed. I was not morally superior because Hale succeeded. Businesses produce information about timing, execution, markets, and leadership. Families turn that information into identity because identity makes comparison easier. I refused to do that to him. I also refused to protect him from consequences. He did not receive the vice president role. He received a smaller opportunity after telling the truth. He earned what came next under rules that did not belong to our parents. That was justice. The $683,400 was never a bill he had to repay. It was a number he had to stop erasing. My parents' support did not invalidate his work. Their absence from mine did not create my value. The ledger corrected attribution. It did not assign worth. My name is Emma Hale. I am 37 now. Hale Systems employs 520 people across 4 countries. The company's latest valuation is higher than the number Daniel first discovered. But I no longer use it in family conversations. Daniel remains at Hale, not as my heir, project, or proof of forgiveness, but as a director accountable to the same organization as everyone else. My parents know what I do. More important, they know they did not create it by rejecting me. We speak. We sometimes celebrate together. We do not pretend 12 years disappeared. The old household agreement remains in my personal archive. I found a copy after my father sold the house. Under the line requiring me to stop all business activity, I wrote one sentence: declined. Company still operating. Then I closed the folder. If your family has ever financed one person's path and then called the result natural talent, remember that support should be named without shame. If they denied you support and used your struggle as evidence, remember that hardship does not prove their judgment. It proves the cost of building without a floor. Keep records of your work. Ask who introduced whom. Ask who paid the tuition, covered the rent, guaranteed the loan, offered the title, or gave the second chance. Do not use the answers to humiliate. Use them to make the story accurate. And when someone who once looked down on you applies to enter what you built, you do not have to choose between revenge and surrender. You can use process. You can decline the title they have not earned. You can offer a smaller door with clear conditions. You can separate employment from family access. You can let them demonstrate change where promises cannot perform it. Would you have hired Daniel after he denied the help behind his career? Would you have offered him the lower role? Or ended the interview the moment he called himself self-made? Tell me in the comments. Share this story with the person who was called a failure during the first version of their life. A failed company is not a failed person. A degree completed late is still a degree. A restaurant shift can be part of a founder's history without becoming evidence that she belonged there forever. Subscribe for more stories about quiet people who preserve the record, refuse the ranking, and let the next opportunity require the truth. I also reviewed my own silence. For years, I said my family had not asked, which was true. I had also stopped offering answers because being underestimated gave me privacy. Privacy protected the company during fragile years. Later, it became a way to avoid discovering whether my parents could change. I do not regret the distance, but I no longer romanticize invisibility. People who deserve access should not have to solve a puzzle to know you. The lesson was not to announce every milestone. It was to share deliberately with people capable of receiving information without converting it into control. Daniel's corrected success narrative became part of our leadership training with names removed. The exercise asked executives to divide an accomplishment into personal effort, team contribution, institutionnel, support, inherited advantage, market timing, and luck. Most people initially assign too much to personal effort. That did not make them dishonest. It made them human. Honesty began when evidence revised the percentage. Leaders who cannot revise attribution eventually demand loyalty from people whose work they have made invisible. One detail from Daniel's application stayed with me. In the section asking about leadership philosophy, he wrote that people perform best when expectations are clear and consequences predictable. He had described the exact environment our parents never created. Expectations changed depending on which child failed. Consequences changed depending on whose future they considered valuable. At Hale, the same policy had to survive the identity of the person standing beneath it. That was why the independent committee mattered more than my personal restraint. Good governance does not require leaders to feel no emotion. It requires systems that keep emotion from becoming undisclosed authority. I also reviewed my own silence. For years, I said my family had not asked, which was true. I had also stopped offering answers because being underestimated gave me privacy. Privacy protected the company during fragile years. Later, it became a way to avoid discovering whether my parents could change. I do not regret the distance, but I no longer romanticize invisibility. People who deserve access should not have to solve a puzzle to know you. The lesson was not to announce every milestone. It was to share deliberately with people capable of receiving information without converting it into control. Daniel's corrected success narrative became part of our leadership training, with names removed. The exercise asked executives to divide an accomplishment into personal effort, team contribution, institutionnel support, inherited advantage, market timing, and luck. Most people initially assign too much to personal effort. That did not make them dishonest. It made them human. Honesty began when evidence revised the percentage. Leaders who cannot revise attribution eventually demand loyalty from people whose work they have made invisible. One detail from Daniel's application stayed with me. In the section asking about leadership philosophy, he wrote that people perform best when expectations are clear and consequences predictable. He had described the exact environment our parents never created. Expectations changed depending on which child failed. Consequences changed depending on whose future they considered valuable. At Hale, the same policy had to survive the identity of the person standing beneath it. That was why the independent committee mattered more than my personal restraint. Good governance does not require leaders to feel no emotion. It requires systems that keep emotion from becoming undisclosed authority. I also reviewed my own silence. For years, I said my family had not asked, which was true. I had also stopped offering answers because being underestimated gave me privacy. Privacy protected the company during fragile years. Later, it became a way to avoid discovering whether my parents could change. I do not regret the distance, but I no longer romanticize invisibility. People who deserve access should not have to solve a puzzle to know you. The lesson was not to announce every milestone. It was to share deliberately with people capable of receiving information without converting it into control. Daniel's corrected success narrative became part of our leadership training with names removed. The exercise asked executives to divide an accomplishment into personal effort, team contribution, institutionnel support, inherited advantage, market timing, and luck. Most people initially assign too much to personal effort. That did not make them dishonest. It made them human. Honesty began when evidence revised the percentage. Leaders who cannot revise attribution eventually demand loyalty from people whose work they have made invisible. One detail from Daniel's application stayed with me. In the section asking about leadership philosophy, he wrote that people perform best when expectations are clear and consequences predictable. He had described the exact environment our parents never created. Expectations changed depending on which child failed. Consequences changed depending on whose future they considered valuable. At Hale, the same policy had to survive the identity of the person standing beneath it. That was why the independent committee mattered more than my personal restraint. Good governance does not require leaders to feel no emotion. It requires systems that keep emotion from becoming undisclosed authority. I also reviewed my own silence. For years, I said my family had not asked, which was true. I had also stopped offering answers because being underestimated gave me privacy. Privacy protected the company during fragile years. Later, it became a way to avoid discovering whether my parents could change. I do not regret the distance, but I no longer romanticize invisibility. People who deserve access should not have to solve a puzzle to know you. The lesson was not to announce every milestone. It was to share deliberately with people capable of receiving information without converting it into control. Daniel's corrected success narrative became part of our leadership training with names removed. The exercise asked executives to divide an accomplishment into personal effort, team contribution, institutionnel support, inherited advantage, market timing, and luck. Most people initially assign too much to personal effort. That did not make them dishonest. It made them human. Honesty began when evidence revised the percentage. Leaders who cannot revise attribution eventually demand loyalty from people whose work they have made invisible. Daniel's corrected success narrative became part of our leadership training with names removed. The exercise asked executives to divide an accomplishment into personal effort, team contribution, institutionnel support, inherited advantage, market timing, and luck. Most people initially assign too much to personal effort. That did not make them dishonest. It made them human. Honesty began when evidence revised the percentage. Leaders who cannot revise attribution eventually demand loyalty from people whose work they have made invisible. One detail from Daniel's application stayed with me. In the section asking about leadership philosophy, he wrote that people perform best when expectations are clear and consequences predictable. He had described the exact environment our parents never created. Expectations changed depending on which child failed. Consequences changed depending on whose future they considered valuable. At Hale, the same policy had to survive the identity of the person standing beneath it. That was why the independent committee mattered more than my personal restraint. Good governance does not require leaders to feel no emotion. It requires systems that keep emotion from becoming undisclosed authority. I also reviewed my own silence. For years, I said my family had not asked, which was true. I had also stopped offering answers because being underestimated gave me privacy. Privacy protected the company during fragile years. Later, it became a way to avoid discovering whether my parents could change. I do not regret the distance, but I no longer romanticize invisibility. People who deserve access should not have to solve a puzzle to know you. The lesson was not to announce every milestone. It was to share deliberately with people capable of receiving information without converting it into control. Daniel's corrected success narrative became part of our leadership training with names removed. The exercise asked executives to divide an accomplishment into personal effort, team contribution, institutionnel support, inherited advantage, market timing, and luck. Most people initially assign too much to personal effort. That did not make them dishonest. It made them human. Honesty began when evidence revised the percentage. Leaders who cannot revise attribution eventually demand loyalty from people whose work they have made invisible. One detail from Daniel's application stayed with me. In the section asking about leadership philosophy, he wrote that people perform best when expectations are clear and consequences predictable. He had described the exact environment our parents never created. Expectations change depending on which child failed. Consequences change depending on whose future they considered valuable. At Hale, the same policy had to survive the identity of the person standing beneath it. That was why the independent committee mattered more than my personal restraint. Good governance does not require leaders to feel no emotion. It requires systems that keep emotion from becoming undisclosed authority. I also reviewed my own silence. For years, I said my family had not asked, which was true. I had also stopped offering answers because being underestimated gave me privacy. Privacy protected the company during fragile years. Later, it became a way to avoid discovering whether my parents could change. I do not regret the distance, but I no longer romanticize invisibility. People who deserve access should not have to solve a puzzle to know you. The lesson was not to announce every milestone. It was to share deliberately with people capable of receiving information without converting it into control. Daniel's corrected success narrative became part of our leadership training, with names removed. The exercise asked executives to divide an accomplishment into personal effort, team contribution, institutionnel support, inherited advantage, market timing, and luck. Most people initially assign too much to personal effort. That did not make them dishonest. It made them human. Honesty began when evidence revised the percentage. Leaders who cannot revise attribution eventually demand loyalty from people whose work they have made invisible. That boundary protected more than Daniel. When an applicant has a personal relationship with someone in authority, the connection should be disclosed. Decision-making should be reassigned where reasonably possible. And verification should remain limited to relevant claims the candidate has authorized the company to examine. Family resentment, private wealth, and past emotional injuries are not hidden hiring criteria. A fair process may still reject a relative, but it should do so for the same documented reason that would apply to any other candidate. Scriptwriter Nguyen Van Chien.